This week, carbon border taxes. Hello and welcome to this week's Climate Breakdown. We're going to be talking about carbon border taxes. Now last week, the Japanese government announced that it will be looking into doing its own carbon border tax, or a carbon border adjustment mechanism, if you really like the jargon. What's that got to do with Europe, I hear you ask? Well, it's basically a direct reaction to the European Union's ongoing work to put in place a carbon border tax, and the fact that Joe Biden's now the US president, and the fact that the US is probably going to look into doing something similar in some capacity down the line. So Japanese government thinks, right, we have to react because others are moving ahead with this. And this is the raison d'etre of EU climate policy at the end of the day. We can't do enough by ourselves, so we have to convince everyone else to follow our playbook. And if you have to take one thing from this, it's basically working in a sort of way. Proof in the pudding, of course, because none of the details about any of these schemes have come out so far. But there are reasons to think that there is a lot to come from this. The German Greens recently said that they think that the EU and the US should team up and do their own joint carbon border tax of some sort, or at least coordinate on it. Australia is reacting to this, realizing that their trade policy will not be able to continue the way it does at the moment. Russia has already said, no, this isn't going to be World Trade Organization compliant, you can't do this, which probably means that they will find a way to live with it rather than try and get it struck down at the WTO. Big questions now are, how do you design it? The EU has made a big deal of the fact that it will be WTO compliant. They have to make sure that, well, what do you spend the revenues on? How do you make sure that that is not going to be labelled as an unfair trade practice by someone at a trade panel? And there will be a proposal from the European Commission later this year. The impact assessment and whatnot are all going on at the moment, so they need to see how to do it for the best possible price and the biggest impact and the lowest cost to anyone who might kick up a fuss about it. So there we go, that's another thing to look out for. Thank you for watching once again. Retweet, like, subscribe, all of that jazz, and I will see you next time for another Europe Breakdown.